So I was today years old when I first heard about the 1619 Project, which according to my own limited understanding is a piece of leftist or liberal propaganda used to further radicalize black folk in America, right? To make black folk even more pissed off and more hung up about slavery than they already are. So that being said, I want to get into a video that's just going to give us some insight into what this is. And I believe it matters because in breaking the strongholds or those chains in our minds that oftentimes keep us stuck, especially for black folks in America, it's this perpetual victimhood, this holding and clinging onto the past that may or may not have happened. And I'm not saying slavery didn't happen, Jim Crow, etc. But as far as what the experience actually was like and what we're being sold as what the reality was. Too often we're told that America is built on slavery, it's built on racism, it's built on violence, but then you look at every other empire and they were built on the very same things. So why is America any different? And I would argue to say that America is different because it did the best job in eradicating these things and giving the most rights to the most amount of people. But I digress. Let's get into this video. Shout out to PragerU for always putting us on game. Let's get into it.
Have you heard of the 1619 Project?
I sure have.
It was published by the New York Times in August of 2019. It won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary in 2020. Its thesis: the United States was founded in 1619 when the first slave was brought to North America. Wait, that brings up some questions. What happened to 1776? To July 4th? The Declaration of Independence? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison. According to the 1619 Project, the Founding Fathers pushed for all that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness stuff to protect their slave holdings. Independence from England, that was just a smokescreen. To them, everything that's wrong with America is tied to her original sin of slavery, from segregation to traffic jams. Yes, traffic jams. For the 1619 Project authors, racism is not a part of the American experience. It is the American experience. Is this true? Let's look at three of the project's major...
America is so racist that a black man can sit in front of a camera and talk for a living and make a very good living doing it. That's how racist my America is. It's so racist that I can literally talk for a living. Just connect those dots. Because in the mind of a liberal, everything is racist, including math, IQ tests, obesity, and this remote to my fan over here. You see, if it wasn't racist, then why would the most important buttons be white? You know what I'm saying? Like you really have to deep this sort of stuff. You have to be woke about these things. Why would the most important buttons be white and be given utmost priority where the darker hue is carrying the white buttons? Racism. Simple. It's all racism.
Claims. 1. Preserving slavery was the real cause of the American Revolution. If you asked the founders why they no longer wanted to be a British colony, they would have given you a long list of reasons. Taxation without representation, conflicts over debts from the French and Indian War, and the Stamp Act would be just a few. Probably most important was the burning desire to be free, to chart their own destiny as a sovereign nation. Protecting slavery was not under threat from the British. In fact, Britain didn't free the slaves in its overseas colonies until 1833. 57 years later, after the Declaration of Independence. Yes, the subject of slavery was hotly debated at the Constitutional Convention, but that was after the war was won. 2. Slavery made America rich. Slavery made some Americans rich.
Okay, yeah, we're really going to unpack this, but I just want to let this be known. So I am currently about halfway through the Thomas Jefferson autobiography. It's probably the most comprehensive, well put together. Historians contributed to this thing to make it as cohesive as possible. And, there's people out there who believe that all history is a lie, everything's made up. So there's no convincing those folks of anything. But as far as what I have read, Thomas Jefferson himself was actually an abolitionist, early abolitionist. I'm talking as early as the 1780s. They were looking to abolish slavery in the United States. And they said that the vote that was basically the possible turning point, like it could have been 1865 before 1865. The vote came down to one delegate who was out of New Jersey. And because that dude was sick on that day or whatever his excuse was, I'm stuck in traffic because it's racist, of course. Ended up basically going the other way. And so another almost 100 years of slavery in America, but there were still abolitionist movements. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. You know, the Republican Party wasn't formed out of nothingness. There was already a movement of abolishing slavery. Even guys who are as controversial as anybody, like the Rockefellers, abolitionists. In fact, Rockefeller's his own family housed individuals like Sojourner Truth and others who are coming through that Underground Railroad. So these are the facts. Again, some folks don't like it. Whether you're on the left or the right, you might not want to hear it. You want to stick to just the conspiracy of things. But these are the facts of how this country came to be. There were those who were in opposition, and that's why America was the first country to fight itself on the basis of slavery. So again, if America is so damn racist, if you truly believe that, especially for black folks here, anybody else who's a quote unquote POC or whatever term they're using nowadays, I can't catch up or I can't keep up with this stuff. But if you genuinely believe it is, then I would suggest going to any other country and experiencing that place. And there are a multitude of places that, you won't experience in Europe, etc. But I would suggest to you go to Africa, wherever else it is, and see if there's not tribalism and see if there's not these distinct, separations of customs, etc. It's easy to point to the place that has afforded you everything that you have. And this is coming from a guy who was born in Africa. So, yeah. Continue to cook, good sir.
True enough. Eli Yale, for example, made a fortune in the slave trade. He donated money and land for the university that is named after him.
Whoa.
But the institution of slavery didn't make America rich. In fact, the slave system badly slowed the
woke ass Yale. Are y'all gonna give up your degrees? Are y'all gonna give up your Yale education because it was funded by a slaveholder? I think not.
Economic development of half the country. As economist Thomas Sowell points out, in 1860, just 1 year before the Civil War began, the South had only 1/6 as many factories as the North. Almost 90% of the country's skilled, well-paid laborers and professionals were based in the North. Banking, railroads, manufacturing, all were concentrated in the North. The South was an economic backwater. And the cost of abolishing slavery was enormous, not merely in terms of dollars. Lincoln borrowed billions to pay for it, but also in terms of human life. 360,000 Union soldiers died in order to free 4 million slaves. That works out to about 1 soldier in blue for every 10 slaves freed. It's hard to look at that butcher's bill and conclude that the nation turned a profit from slavery. And many things have happened since 1865. In the almost 200 years since the Civil War, the population of the country has grown almost 900%, and our national GDP has increased 12,000%. Slavery did not make America rich. 3. Racism is an unchangeable part of America.
The reason why that argument is so important is because of this reparations nonsense. I'm calling it what it is. It's nonsense. It doesn't make sense as far as how do you calculate out who gets what, right? Because as some people go back in their lineage, you'll see that maybe they were slaveholders, but more likely there were not. More likely than not, the ancestry of the white people that you are claiming owe you something had nothing to do with that institution known as slavery. It was the wealthy top percent in the South who owned a majority of the slaves. And then if we really want to get down to the nitty gritty of these numbers, what about the ones who are part of your own blood lineage? How do you differentiate between the two? Because there are white folks who you'll find had, quote unquote, slaves' blood. And then there are black folks who have slave owner blood. How do you break that down? Because there's currently a proposal. There's somebody right now, I believe, in Congress who she's pushing for this, a multi-trillion-dollar bill for reparations. And even if something were to pass, I guarantee you 90+% of that money would be back in the hands of the wealthy. Is a well-known phenomenon, right? These are not people who have adjusted themselves to wealth, who have learned how to manage wealth. So you give a fool money. What's it say in the scripture? Money or fool and his money, or fool and their money will soon part ways. It would actually be a wise decision, business decision, to say, you know what? Let's give them, the money they're asking for. And in the interim, you build up as many luxury brands, right? You build up as many vehicles of entertainment, etc., slop entertainment, etc., and you will become a very wealthy person because of reparations. As a white man, as an Asian man, as an Indian man, as anybody else outside of foundational black Americans, quote unquote FBAs, you will make a lot of money because them folks are going to look to spend it in the same way all those COVID checks. You know where they went? LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet, and Hennessy. That's where that money went. That man right there, Anard Barward, or whatever the hell his name is, the Frenchman. That man made more money and became the wealthiest man in the world at the time, during a time where we were in economic turmoil because of the mentality of these people who have been brainwashed. And so the same system is selling you this nonsense to say, well, you're owed this, this, and that. I'm not liable for my grandfather's sins, and I would not hold anybody else to do the same. And the likelihood is that wasn't even their granddaddy. But anyway, let us continue. Let us finish this off.
This argument is more philosophical than scholarly, but it undergirds the entire 1619 project. It's also pernicious because it suggests that the United States is an inherently racist country that can't overcome its flaws. Yet that's exactly what it's done. Today, America is the most successful multiracial country in history, the only white majority country to elect a black president twice. Of course, progress has not always been smooth. There have been terrible setbacks. But to compare American attitudes about race today to America 100 years ago, let alone to 1619, is absurd. Here's a fact that should be better known. 2 million black Africans have come to America as legal immigrants from countries like Nigeria in the last 50 years and have become one of the most successful groups in the country.
Oh, don't say that. No, don't say that. They don't want to hear that. Nah, don't say that. Don't talk about the tethers now. You gonna get the FBA's pissed off. Don't talk about the tethers coming here. They didn't go through what we went through. 400 years. They didn't go through what they didn't. They went through colonial powers. They went through their own forms of slavery. And I mean slavery in the continent as well as abroad. And then, and I mean, I'm not saying this is everybody. There's still a huge victimhood mentality throughout the continent of Africa. Throughout, each of its countries has its own stories that oftentimes people use to keep themselves stuck. But when you do have immigrants who come over here, they see the opportunity. And that's, black, white, or anything in between. When you are used to having a lack of opportunity and you are willing to seize in that environment, when you come to a place that affords you damn near all opportunities, it's over. It's game time. There's a reason why I think the stat is like more than 50% of the first generation millionaires and billionaires in this country are first generation. Either they're, immigrants directly themselves, or they're the first generation Americans. Some wild statistic like that. Look it up for yourself. Don't just believe me. Don't take my word or even this man's word for it. Look it up for yourself. So the excuse game has got to go if you're going to find yourself in a better place in life.
Move to what is often called an evil, racist country Because unlike many people lucky enough to be born here, they know that America is a land of opportunity for everyone. It's also only fair to note that while blacks have heroically fought for our rights, often against great odds, we haven't done it alone. A vast number of decent whites have also advanced the cause of racial equality. To cite one of countless examples, the U.S. Senate that passed the landmark Civil Rights Act in 1964 contained 98 whites and 2 men of color, and they were Asian. The great black leaders of the past, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King, never lost faith in America's promise that all people are created equal. None of them believed that racism was America's defining characteristic. They were right. Shortly after the 1619 Project was published, a group of distinguished historians, almost all on the left, wrote a public letter condemning the work. They called it a displacement of historical understanding by ideology. They were right too. I'm Wilfred Riley, Associate Professor of Political Science at Kentucky State University for Prager University.
So even professors on the left were like, this is absolute hogwash, it's trash, and yet here we are living in this parallel timeline, this dystopian reality where people are still buying this nonsense and are basing their worldview on this nonsense. That's why I bring it up. This isn't a sideline conversation. This is what is actually driving the entire conversation when it comes to, those who are the most jaded within the quote unquote black community. And it allows for the very same problems that they continue to cry about. God honest truth. It's the number one perpetuator of black disenfranchisement, right? Marginalization is the mentality that we can't get ahead. There's nothing else to be said about it. There's no second more important. It is one. It is the mentality that I cannot. If you lack the self-worth, self-esteem, if you don't believe that you are deserving of something, no matter how many opportunities are afforded to you, no matter what is in front of you, something could be given to you. The reparations, all of them, financial as well as non-financial. You can be given land as well as currency, and you will still find yourself broke, miserable, and destitute because you haven't worked on the psychology aspect. And that's why I do what I do. Because ideas matter, because mentality matters. The way in which we think about the world and perceive the world matters. And so what we allow in is going to have the greatest impact of what essentially we project out. So, yeah, shout out to PragerU. Shout out to my brother over here. Eloquently put that together. Till the next time, peace. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there, or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace.
I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 365, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up. You know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises. You get to praising.